Welcome to Bridging the Gap. This is a show that spotlights young, talented individuals who have redefined their purpose, challenged norms, and created their own paths. I'm your host, Sheila, and it gives me great pleasure to have Ananya Singh here today, who truly has a very unique story to share. Ananya's journey really encompasses the journey from investment banking to creating a social enterprise that empowers women and truly impacts communities. Ananya, tell me about you in your words.
Thanks, Sheila. Super excited to be here and to
And
share
I'm
more
excited
about.
to have you here,
Thank
truly.
you. And to share more of Kala and like what we're doing, what we're building. So it's basically a social enterprise, as you correctly
Kala,
mentioned.
that's what you call it,
Kala.
okay?
Kala means craft.
Yes, of course.
And the sisterhood of women that we work with, they call Kala Sakhi. Sakhi, as you know, means friends.
Friend.
So the Kala Sakhi sisterhood is basically a growing community now, almost 1,000 women strong by
Wow.
next year, who have been trained in livelihood and skilling work.
Okay.
So we actually implement grassroots programs across 4 states in North India. So Delhi, Rajasthan, Haryana, and UP. And what we do is basically go to the village level or at the urban slum level and work with women to establish a decentralized supply chain.
Okay.
And basically provide them flexible opportunities for work. So, as you know, as a woman, it's very difficult to balance care duties with work.
True.
And all of us face this. I think this cuts across every strata, right? Like you
Every
could be in
strata, every generation.
every geography,
Every
every woman.
geography, yeah.
And I just feel like as a society, we're not doing enough to bridge that gap. But what we're trying to do at the grassroots level is work with women who are not only bound by care duties, and bound is a strong word, but like, you know, every mother wants to be there for their children. But also earn an income.
Sure.
So there's that combined with, of course, like societal, patriarchal, cultural, mobility barriers, access barriers that prevent a lot of women in rural and urban, rural India, which is like villages
Yes.
where we work, and urban slums as well, from actually leaving their homes to earn an income.
Okay.
So what we're trying to do at Kala, and a lot of amazing craft-based enterprises are also doing this in India, where you're basically establishing the supply chain at their homes. You create a village workshop, you create a community center, and you basically give them opportunities to earn through craft, which is Kala, and then we basically do skilling and then ensure marketability for the products that they're creating by selling them in the international as well as domestic market.
Wow.
So that's how it sort of translates into a holistic social enterprise where we're doing the grassroots skilling work. We also open their bank accounts, get them linked to financial security, get them linked to healthcare schemes. But then on the other side, we're also ensuring that they have adequate access to avenues to sell their products, because that's the only way where it'll truly be sustainable for them.
Absolutely. Yeah, otherwise they're just sitting and doing some kala.
Exactly,
But then what
without-
happens to the kala?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
So on that front, we have a brand. It's called the Kala Store,
Oh.
which is the official storefront for all of their
Yes,
creations.
I have seen it. Yes.
And
It's on Instagram as well.
It's on Instagram.
Yeah.
We have like a website. It's an e-commerce platform where you can shop and buy their products. So
Oh.
we're doing a range of things.
Oh, nice.
But the primary craft that we work with is crochet. And it's interesting because it's actually something that has been passed down through tradition. We don't know this, but in India, a lot of women, especially in rural areas, they are taught this by their mothers and grandmothers, because they actually make thali posh, which is what you see on, to cover matkas.
Yeah, yeah.
And then even TV covers.
Yes.
And on Janmashtami.
And on sofas. In the olden
Yeah,
days, you'd have
yeah.
it on the backs of sofas.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, idols clothing on
Yes,
festivals
yes,
like Janmashtami, that's also
yes.
hand crocheted. So it's one of those skill sets that is passed down through tradition, but there's a gap in basically translating that to this massive opportunity that exists where like the sustainable fashion market in India alone is going to hit $9 billion.
Wow.
So, and these women hold stories of sustainability
Close to their
close
heart.
to them.
Yeah.
So you want them to sort of be advocating for that
Yeah.
at a global platform. So we're using fashion and craft as a vehicle to lend them that voice
Wow.
through color.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's, while you were speaking, there were so many things that I was pulling out from there. I think one thing that for me I hold very close to my heart is financial independence.
Yeah.
And you are actually making that happen at a grassroots level.
Yeah.
And I was also thinking that India is a country of so many arts and crafts,
Yeah.
which was really what life was about. That women would sit and do this, then they'd sell it in little marketplaces.
Exactly.
And somewhere along the way, that was lost.
Forgotten.
Yeah, because one is forgotten, and two, it was no longer viable to make something in crochet and then get just 50 paisa for it.
Exactly.
It was,
exactly.
unless there's a commercial viability,
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And I saw that you're doing that as well. I also like the word Sakhi, because I don't know how you look at it, but as I've grown older, I have really come to embrace my women friends.
Yeah.
I find that they are my support system. I find that I can go out to them if I need some help. They'll always step in for me. And especially in the world of nuclear families, I somehow feel that having Sakhis is one of the nicest things that
That's
can
so
happen.
true. Yeah.
So when I was listening to you, I pulled out so many strains of resonance. And I said, this makes complete sense.
Yeah.
While you are doing this, it's something you started on your own.
No, so I can take you through my story. But just before that, actually, you're talking about Sakhis, and I think it's such a powerful word for us because Kala is actually about connecting communities. And I think there is a huge aspect of, like craft also being therapy. Craft being therapy, but also community being therapy for these women, especially at the
course.
village level.
Of
But
course.
what we've seen so strong is the sisterhood come together in times of crisis. They also, they also do pool savings and take interloaning, and
Oh.
so they're always there
Like a
for
little
each other.
microfinance thing they're
They do
doing.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's it started off with us being that support system, but it's so interesting to see because now they're each other's support system.
Wow.
And that's way stronger than what, anyone else could be. The communities that are living together, they, they therapize each other, they come together. And usually when we're practicing crochet or any craft, there's also song and dance. And traditionally, like you were saying, in India, we've seen so much of this, but so many things like even like Gidda, for example. Like,
Absolutely.
that was because women would come together and
That's right.
it would be like
Entertainment.
and also like they'd like talk about the problems they were having at
Yeah,
home,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
it would turn out to be a craft or like a they would create together. So I think this process of connecting communities, creating together, which is also what connects us together, and this is sort of like the backbone of Kala. And I think like how you are feeling connected to the stories of the women that I'm sharing with you, because you can resonate and relate at so many levels. So, like the products in a way are messengers for that across geographies.
I'm going to ask you something that is, it's on my mind, and I'm going to cut you there and ask you this question. There is this myth that women are bitchy to each other. And when women get together, there's a hell of a lot of politicking that happens. So, and you've been talking about therapizing each other. You're talking about they are there for each other. They're becoming each other's support systems. I think I can count, and it's a long life I've lived,
Yeah.
okay, and a long professional life. I can count on my fingertips when I have felt a woman has been mean to me.
Yeah.
Invariably, women have come through for me. They have stood by me.
Yeah.
They have coached me. They have supported me. It's been incredible, the kind of women that I've worked with. And I'm not talking about only my company.
Yeah.
I'm talking about an extended network of mentors, of clients, of potential candidates, of people I meet. It's been incredible.
I think I truly believe that is because women are inherently compassionate. I truly believe that. I believe that there are like these feminist qualities of compassion and care and
Are
empathy.
very powerful.
And they come so naturally to
Yes.
women that you will see that's why you will turn to a woman and she will in all odds stand up for you and be able to put herself in your shoes. So I think and we discussed this earlier, but that is something that is so integral to why I started this journey, this inherent quality of compassion and
And
care.
that's what I would like to know.
Yeah,
That,
so-
I mean, you were a investment banker. You pretty much had the job that a lot of people want. I'm sure you were making the big bucks. It was great to tell people that, oh, I'm an investment banker. I'm sure your parents would have said, oh, our daughter's an investment banker. How does someone who's into investment banking start a Kala store?
Yeah.
And what is it that motivated you? Where did it begin?
Yeah, so I feel like growing up, I always, like you said, you value financial independence very high. That's something I think that I've always really valued. I always wanted to be financially independent as early as possible. Like start earning money, start applying for the jobs that get you the most money. So when I was in school, I idolized my father, who is an investment banker, and he sort of like sat at the head of the table and was making decisions. And you have this mental model of what like being in power and like financial independence can give you. And I think that was a huge driver for me when I was in school. And so like I chose to follow the path that my father took, where I said, okay, like he was an investment banker, I'm going to do it too, and I'm going to study commerce. I went to the college he went to Sri Ram College of Commerce. I studied there. There was the first placement that happens is for investment banking. I sat for that, and then I got the job and I shifted to Bombay. And I was working with Deutsche Bank as an analyst. And I was working in corporate finance, which I always found the subject very interesting. I was very passionate about the subject as well. And so I enjoyed it when I started work. But what ended up happening was 2 years into the job, I started reflecting on what I really wanted to do and where I wanted to be, and these questions of purpose and identity and what really makes me click and like what makes me want to wake up in the morning every day started like coming about. And that's where I feel like a lot of early influences that shaped the way a lot of the things I wanted to do and the decisions I wanted to make were taken. So I was actually leading an organization that focuses on creating social enterprises for communities in
Okay.
college. It's called Enactus.
Okay.
You can check it out. Like they have chapters in different colleges. And at that point,
This was in college?
This was in college.
Okay.
But growing up, I was always exposed to a lot of social work.
How does that
So
happen? Because
that
you
was-
just told me that your dad was into
Yeah.
investment banking. So where
So
did the social
the
work?
counterpart, my mum.
Okay.
She actually has. When we moved back to India, which was when I was about 8 years old, she
And you moved back from where?
from the States.
Okay,
So
from the
we were
States.
living there
Okay.
for my early years.
Okay.
And she essentially used to volunteer and work at a lot of non-profits across education, livelihoods, women's work. So she would always rope us in. So every summer we would spend actually with her in the communities and NGOs she was working with. And
Wow.
and
and
then-
like actively rope in or just go for it?
no, actively rope in. Like we would direct plays and like it was a lot of fun. Like our summers were spent between sports and this kind of work, and then in school as well. Like I took that up. So this was all like growing up these things you
little
do.
things,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I was there was a like Rotary. There's a chapter in school called Interact
Yes, of
Club.
course, of course.
So I was also heading that in school, and then we were running blood donation drives. So there was a lot of time spent with, I would say like 50% of my time in at least the summers and all was spent with people who I was learning a lot from, who, and you sort of become used to that sort of exposure. You sort of become addicted to that sort of exposure when you grow up doing it. So even when I was in college and I saw this thing that blends something that I cared about from an interest perspective, which was like business and finance, but I got to actually spend time in communities. I said, how could this get any better? So I joined it, then I ended up leading
That's
the
in Actis.
organization. Yeah, and then we ended up running a lot of projects where we would work with communities who say knew some like there was a community of puppeteers that we were working with that knew a traditional craft. So our student body, we actually sort of modernized that, got them opportunities and big contracts. So this was actually initiated by my seniors, but they knew like traditional Rajasthani puppetry. This community there in Shadipur, which is a colony in Delhi. It's called Katputli Colony actually.
Okay.
And they actually had this idea of getting them trained through the National School of Drama in Muppetry, and then they used that to create videos for social messaging, which were aired all over Doordarshan. And then they went to like Nagaland and performed. They performed all over the country. So there was government tender income that was coming into these
Wow.
artisans' hands
Wow.
because it just made a slight business
Decision,
change
yeah.
and decision for them. So we started implementing projects like this. There was a community of manual scavengers we were working in. We were also conceptualizing new projects. And so there was, I would say, like, while I was studying and also trying to apply for placements, my whole college life, the friendships I hold closest from college as well were with these people where we were actually spending more time conceptualizing these projects, trying to sustain them, trying to run them. And so coming back to, like, how my journey sort of panned out 2 years into my job at Deutsche Bank, when I actually looked back and I thought there was a void. And I think this is what like a lot of, I would say like our generation, this is something that we solve for is there's like a void or an emptiness that sets in work life sometimes.
And why does that happen?
I think if you're not doing something that truly fulfills you, then it's like it's basic, but like that will create emptiness, right? So
It's interesting that you're talking about what truly fulfills you, because I think that is really a privilege that your generation has.
Yeah.
I remember that when I started my career, it was all about making ends meet. And the idea of not feeling fulfilled was something I could not even toy with.
Yeah.
Because the idea was, too bad, you just
Yeah.
got to earn your money.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that while people feel unfulfilled, people like you decide to make a difference to an entire community. It's not just about making a difference to you.
Yeah.
Now, when you decided to go into investment banking, of course, you were following your father's footsteps. But when you started doing all this work, what was the dynamic at home? Were both your parents excited about what you were doing, or did one of them say, why are you wasting your time? Just get down and study, or you have to do your GMAT, or whatever you had to do.
Yeah.
Did that happen?
So it was actually not as much of a, I would say like a immediate transition, because when I was in investment banking, 2 years in, I decided that I wanted to work in the social impact space.
Okay.
That decision had already been taken.
Okay.
And that's when I started applying for jobs in global nonprofits, where it wasn't a huge jump, to be honest. Like
Okay.
I was getting paid well. I was working in I actually shifted to a global nonprofit, the Clinton Foundation. I
Okay.
was working here in Delhi. So when the pandemic hit, I had shifted back to Delhi.
Okay.
And I started working at my last job, and I was fulfilled. Like for those 3.5 years that I was working there, I was actually fulfilled. I was doing work that that I knew that it was like in many ways my true north, because I was being able to work in some ways at an implementation level. We were working on public health programs. I was working on tuberculosis specifically, so solving that problem in India. And I think the shift from healthcare investment banking, which is what I was doing, to then coming on to the public side where I was looking at this from a social good perspective. It was very fulfilling, and there was a lot of interesting work also because
Like,
I was.
what did you do?
So we were. It was a mix of like strategy and implementation.
Okay.
But in the last year, there was a lot of work that sort of, I think, nudged me also in this direction.
Tell me more.
So I think one of the pivotal points in my journey was when I was actually I was actually seconded to the ministry.
Okay.
For some time, and as part of that, we had to go for a supervisory visit to a district in Assam. It's
Okay.
called Nolbari.
Okay.
And you basically have to go and see how programs are being run and give feedback and say that, okay, this is what needs to change.
Whether the funds are being used for what
Yeah,
they're supposed to be
yeah,
used
exactly.
for. Okay.
And so, like, I think up until that point, I was always looking at things in a very, like, intellectual perspective. You were always, like, solving problems at a higher policy level. You're making, like, strategic recommendations. And I had done grassroots work in this sphere as well. We were implementing pilots in Chhattisgarh and, like, trying to come up with innovations. But seeing it from the government's perspective at a very systemic level was very interesting because there were a couple of instances. So, I spent about 10 days there. And what you'll see very closely in the Indian public health system is that the frontline workers and the people who are delivering
The
care.
Anganwadis, the Asha workers.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the people delivering care at villages and even in the urban like slum population are women. Asha workers are women, right?
Okay.
And Anganwadi workers
Well,
are women. Yeah.
Yes.
So the front line is actually women who are inherently very compassionate, and I spent a day.
And they're from that community.
Exactly.
Okay.
So they are actually acting from you will see more often than not that they're acting from a point of actual care because it's their actual community. And then as you go up the ranks and you go to the senior leadership levels, you'll see this stark difference where a lot of the programs are being run by technocrats typically. So people, typically males who are between the age of like older males who have a lot of theoretical experience
But may not have
actually been there delivering care. So there was this feeling that a lot of the decisions are somewhat being taken from a programmatic perspective. Whereas like when you actually go on ground and see what's happening at the front lines, they're being taken from like a care and compassion perspective. And then there was this point where
You said you spent a day.
so there was this point where we had to actually see the utilization of a boat clinic because we were supervising a village where there were about 28 river islands that were connected to the village, but they were hard to reach. So each river island doesn't have any primary care facilities. They don't have a doctor on those river islands. So you have to actually...
And how many people would be on the river island?
Small populations, but varying, like maybe like 3,000, 4,000.
Oh, that's a large population.
For India, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean...
And I'm not, I'll have to fact check this, but...
Okay, fair.
But yeah, like...
But it's not like
it
you're
wasn't like
talking-
a huge population. It was like mini islands, little communities. But now they're only connected to this one district or like this one district health center, primary healthcare center that you can only get to by boat. You can't get care if you don't sort of have access to that.
So you were working at the Clinton Foundation and you got an opportunity, you said, to do the strategy work.
Yeah.
And it was during the secondment that you got a real opportunity to see what happens at the grassroots level.
Yeah.
And I think your observation that at the grassroots level, it's mostly the women who are working, while at a program level, it may be men. And while it's a program approach that's taken at a strategic level, at a grassroots level, it's really about that care, compassion for your community. Now, can you tell me what happened and what really transpired when you went to this grassroots level? I'd love to know how it impacted you. What was the experience like? I've never done it. I have never ever done grassroots level work. And I'll tell you why after you answer my question.
Okay. No, so there was a great mix in terms of exposure. We got access to strategy projects, and there was always that aspect because we were impacting lives at the end of the day. You're creating programs for people, so you have to spend time understanding their problems, understanding how projects are implemented, and how you can sort of like tweak that. So we spent about like some time in different states. So I was in Chhattisgarh for some time, and Assam for some time, where I was telling you about a sort of like secondment I had done to the ministry, and with them I had gone with a group of about 12 people to a district in Assam called Nolbari, where
Okay.
we were basically spending about 10 days just trying to understand how the public health programs are working and make recommendations.
In your experience, because you are working with much older women, you're working with, you are yourself very young, how or what are some of the things that have made this multi-generational work at Kala?
Um, See, I think, and that's what like sometimes I think about it, but I think for me, honestly, starting up in, it's a very like, I don't know if, but yeah, I think starting up in services or like in a tech industry for me would have actually been harder. Because I feel like one thing that has actually been able to bridge that gap for us is the tangibility of the product and the craft. And it's a very like, it's a very rare thing, right? But you can also magnify that into the broader mission statement because for us, we have this craft and this objective that is tying everyone together where all they truly care about is to be able to create something that is beautiful and to be able to take back
And take it
income
to the
for their homes and
marketplace.
take it to the so they know that you are not going to be able to, one is not without the other. Everyone knows that in the organization, and it's a very clear thing. You don't see it as clearly in a like if you're in a traditional, like in an investment bank, you wouldn't see it as clearly. It's often seems like a zero sum game, but here, because you're looking at economics at a micro level so regularly,
You're all
you
tied in together.
yeah, and you see people get tied in together so closely where the women are literally coming up to us, and you'll hear it in their testimonials also saying that uh, without Kala store, there's no Kala Sakhi. Without Kala Sakhi, there's no
Then no
Kala
Kala
store.
store.
So everyone knows this, and so everyone values each other, and so you're tied to a broader mission, and our mission is encompassed in the craft that, and it's a really beautiful thing that we're tied to. But I think that you can translate this for any startup and any
Corporate.
where, but I think that lacking, and I think the gap I see here is that a lot of people just don't care about the mission of the companies they're working in, or they don't even make an effort to know about it. It's sometimes like paycheck to paycheck, and so you will see people not contributing the way you would want them to, not
And
connecting.
and that's so true because it is this very thin divide between my benefit and the organization
collective, yeah.
and how do both work together.
Yeah.
And sometimes, this is not this is not generation specific. I think sometimes as people we get very self specific, we
Yeah.
say what's in it for me, what am I getting out of
Yeah.
it, instead of saying how do we all benefit together.
Yeah.
Interesting. But you don't find the generation divides at the Kala store.
No, because we're a very small team. So the ones.
No, I'm talking about with your Kala Sakhis. You don't find that divide?
Because there's this common thread. I think there has to be some common thread. And like I said, it's literally an artisan collective. Right?
Yeah,
We
yeah.
are an artisan
Collective.
We don't look at companies like collectives. We look at companies like large organizations in glass structures where you punch in, punch out, and you're there like day to day. But the power of a collective is that you never really have this gap because everyone is tied to one common mission. And it's really beautiful. And you see women coming together in collectives, not just, I mean, you've seen Amul grow the way.
Yeah, of course.
right?
Amazing.
Yeah. And
In
you
fact,
have
I
like-
was in Anand. And when I saw the story, this was the first time I went to Gujarat and saw this beautiful thing that
Yeah.
was created. I was just blown away. how people can come together and actually
Collectivize and-
change the face of a state, change the face of a society,
Of a country, they've
of
put
a
our country on the
yeah,
map. And,
amazing work.
and I think that was actually the first thing we saw, that when we decided to sell products, that was the first thing, and then you get money, and then the literal first thing that all women did was they decided their own operational model. They decided how they wanted to organize themselves. And so these women decided that, we value the role of a manager. So we are going to create a group of 10 women. And that's how we operate now. We have like clusters. And in every 10 women, there's one manager who gets a commission from the women artisans. So they will collectively price the product. They will collectively decide that
Wow.
20% is the amount that the manager should get. But do you see how they're ascribing value to things that are not direct, that are actually taking money away from them?
Yeah.
But they know that it's for the collective good. You have people like tying themselves together. So, but yeah, coming back to your earlier point, I think that if people were to, in this generation, were to care a bit more, and everyone was to just think a bit more about why they're doing what they're doing, and how it ties into, how the vision of the greater good ties into their own vision, you will find that they're not at all.
And it's so powerful what you've said. I don't even realize whether you've realized how powerful it is. You see, we are a young country.
Yeah.
Imagine if every young Indian said, I'm going to look at the collective good.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have garbage issues. We wouldn't have safety issues. We wouldn't have so many issues that we grapple with, right?
Exactly.
I think the one thing that goes wrong, and this is true again across all generational gaps, that we all are armchair whatever.
Yeah.
We all like to sit at home in our little armchairs
rooms.
and say, they are not doing it. These people are not delivering. They should do it differently. But we never ask ourselves what we do.
can do. Yeah.
And I think it's so heartening to see someone like you doing it so gracefully and so unabashedly, and so, it's like, oh, anybody can do this. But I don't think anybody can do this.
I think they can.
And hats off to you if you believe that, and people do that.
Yeah.
But if you were to leave some words of wisdom to your generation on how everybody can do that, what would those couple of things be?
I think it's to go through this process of trying different things. So you put in the work, right? And you try your hand at different things. Anything that intrigues you, try it, but spend time there. Don't jump. A lot of people tend to jump, and then you're like, you don't have enough data points to really go back and say, is this for me? Is this not? And if you continuously do that and you give yourself time and you're patient with it, you will ultimately find a click that I feel like is your true north. And that is something that comes very naturally to you. And I've seen that when people are doing things that come naturally to them, they are automatically in rhythm with the larger universe, and they've clicked with their purpose, and you'll see things fall into place so easily. And I told you earlier, right? But there was one of our advisors that actually sent me a paragraph on this, because I'd had a very mystical experience where a lot of things just seemed to line up for me. And I said, how is this happening? It was baffling. And he was saying that, now because you've sort of found your purpose, the universe is in alignment with you, and you will tend to find things moving according to a sort of like natural progression. So I think being in that state is a huge blessing, and I think anyone who gets to be in that rhythm with something that they truly believe comes naturally to them, is blessed. But you need to put in the work to get
Yes.
there. You can't
Yes.
just say, I wanna dream, and like this is
Yeah.
where I want to be, because you might be dreaming of things that are not actually for you. So try out different things, spend time in those things, but then always be thinking, like, I maintain a journal, and I actually do these practices to actually see, like, because you technically, like, you'll never reach the end. Tomorrow I might want to evolve into a different kind of person who wants different kind of things. So constantly learning and staying foolish, but also like putting in the work and then taking that back and saying, how does this fit into where I should be contributing? Once you find that, I feel like a lot of things tend to
Just
fall into place. Yeah.
No, that's true. I think you've hit the nail on the head. You see, we might want to do things because one, we are passionate or things come naturally to us. But if you don't back it up with discipline,
Yeah.
with rigor, with hard work, with sustenance, then you don't really know whether it was just a fling
Yeah.
or whether it's a lifelong passion.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then even taking these decisions, like I remember talking to my cousin sister sometime back, and I remember her thinking that, um I really value my passion and it's what gives me happiness. And so I want a 9 to 5 job.
To fuel my passion.
Yes. And I was like, you've done the work and you know what you want. So
Yeah.
you're gonna be happy. Like you
Yeah.
will not.
Yeah.
But it's I think the problem is in not doing the work
The
to know
work.
what you want.
Yes.
You need to be able to know what really gives you that gratification.
And that is a challenge in today's generation, right? When I was growing up, I never compared myself with somebody on Instagram.
Exactly.
Or I never knew what somebody else was doing. The only comparison that happened was perhaps somebody telling me, see, your cousin is so much brighter than you are. She's getting better marks than you. But that was the only thing that happened.
Exactly.
But in today's generation, when you're constantly playing this catch-up game with, how do I post it online? What do I look like?
Yeah.
Body image issues, lifestyle issues. I don't think we have time to disconnect
Yeah.
and introspect.
Yeah.
We're just not doing that
Yeah.
enough.
And so travel. I actually feel like that's the biggest thing. And solo travel, like go on your own. I think that it gives you the ability to disconnect. There's this concept called the artist date, where you actually like carve out time for 1 hour every week and you go on your own. It can be in the city, but you just do something by yourself and you people watch, or you like go and get a cup of coffee, you go to an art gallery and you absorb. And you absorb, and then I feel like that's where inspiration really comes from.
True,
And that's when you try.
true.
So I think it's really important, and a lot of pivotal moments for me. Like I also sometimes feel like you can get in a rut when you're not disconnecting and traveling
Yes.
on your own. Or
yes.
just-
Or just that me time to
Yeah.
truly disconnect, not me time to sit and watch a series of,
Exactly.
reel away to glory.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's something I do. You know, I've been running my company now for almost 30 years. And when there are people that you're responsible for and all, it's very difficult to disconnect.
Yeah.
But there are times my team knows that I just pull away.
Yeah.
And I pull away where I'm not available. I tell them the next 3 days I'm not available.
Yeah.
Because that time is my think time.
Exactly.
And at the end of those 3 days, I come back with ideas that can jumpstart us to the next level.
that is what is fueling
That's
your
right.
organization.
I
And
never
think
knew
it's-
you called it an artist date, but it's a wonderful
it's
idea.
Julia Cameron. I think she's written, like, there's a whole concept on this and
Oh,
how
nice.
how it acts as fuel, really, because you're
is,
creating
yeah.
a business, right? Like
Yeah.
you're bringing something to life that never existed, and I think
That's
it's
right.
amazing that your team values that.
Oh, they don't touch me during that
Yeah,
time.
which
In
is-
fact, sometimes when they see me getting edgy,
Yeah.
and they can see that I'm falling into a rut, they'll say, why don't you just take some time off?
Yeah.
And just go and do your think.
Yeah.
Not your thing, but
Yeah.
go and do your think.
Yeah.
And when I do my think, I come back so much happier.
Definitely. And it again is for collective good, because your
Yeah.
enterprise is probably going to get so much more energy that will ultimately fuel the team as well. So yeah.
This has been such an amazing conversation, Ananya. I could sit and chat with you till the cows come home.
Likewise, yeah.
But I think we need to let you go. You have other things to do. I can keep sitting here and chatting. But thank you for making that time and coming and meeting up with us. It's been really, really inspiring. Thank you.
It's been lovely. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone in the team for doing what you all are doing. And I think I mentioned this earlier, but I think when when everyone is coming of age, and I know the younger generation, because we've also, our generation has also seen a global pandemic, there are a lot of questions in our mind. And the fact that you're providing a framework, or not even a framework, but just a channel
Exposure
for people
to other people who figure
understand,
it
I
out
think
a
it's
little more.
so powerful, and I think it's amazing.
Thank you.
And kudos to you. And
Thank you. That's the whole point of bridging the gap, right?
Yeah.
It's learning both ways.
Exactly.
So thank you so much.
Thanks, Sheila.
And that's a wrap for today's episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, check us out on Gen Zen by Chrysalis on Instagram and YouTube. All the wonderful things that the Kala Sakhis are making are available on the Kala store, spelt the KALAA store on Instagram and online. If you have a story to share with us, or you know someone who has an inspiring or riveting story, get in touch with us. We would love to have them as our guest. Till we meet again, stay smiling, stay sweet, and stay zen.